Hey, Mr. Huntington. I decided to make a small video for the project because I thought it might be the best way to explain my thoughts. I was thinking about making like a painting, but I'm not that good at those. Um, Also, hopefully the echo isn't too bad, but I wanted to first explain why I wanted to make this in like a walking video. Um, and it's just basically because I watched this one YouTuber that also does this kind of style. She is very she talks about how to improve upon yourself. She's very nice and caring, and she has a soft tone whenever she talks to you, so I kind of just want to imitate that, because on the whole topic of empathy, I feel like she's really good at exercising that. And I mean, I've looked up to her in many ways where she just like can stay calm in many situations and feel for someone else. I guess moving on to the question, what is empathy and what is its value in the 21st century or literature? Just very briefly, I think that literature has a place in this world that can't ever be replaced. It has a very unique, it requires a unique set of skills to do. It requires you to sit down, to think, to fully process what's going on in front of you, to think about those emotions of the characters that are like living through these lives, and almost putting yourself in them, in their shoes. I mean, this seems kind of redundant, but it's you have to think about their feelings and the plot and everything on your own. No one's telling you how to feel. No one's telling you what to do or whatever. And I think that's just an important part of books. What else? Sorry, I'm just reading some notes right now. You can read someone's ideas, or you're more of like you can read the author's ideas. You can see where they're coming from and how their life has changed them, or what made them write that story. 'Cause sometimes authors are very like, sometimes for me, when I'm reading a book and it's like super like cringy or cheesy or like a rom-com, like those books are very just typical and boring for me. But I guess I could see why the author wanted it. Maybe they just like the whole cheesiness of it, the whole kind of fun. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't really like those books, but it lets you see where they're coming from. And another note that I put down here is that it's hard to explain one's opinion in words with style. And I think that's one thing that authors do have that I would like to mimic, is that they can fully or somewhat accurately explain their feelings and how life has changed them in a confusing way. How does it relate back to empathy? I already said that. They immerse themselves in the other world. Okay, now I just wanted to talk about some of the stories that I've read that have more or less changed my perspective on some views. Sorry. One of those, I should just name them off so far. Let's see, I think there's 5 that are on the top of my head. They're called, what's it called? Swimming of Freedom, No Longer Human, On a Sunbeam, 13 Reasons Why, and The Fault in Our Stars. The Fault in Our Stars was, in my opinion, pretty bad. I didn't really like it. I mean, I know that a lot of people really loved it, but for me, reading it as a kid in middle school, I didn't quite understand what it was about, just because it had a lot of adult themes, like this one scene where this guy was touching this girl's boob outside of a church. I didn't understand it, but he was gonna die, so I guess it was like a dark kind of theme to it. And in this other scene, this guy was the main character, and this guy were at his house playing a video game, and I didn't understand what the whole theme was about, but it was very just like awkward and slow. But yeah, I mean, it did teach me that sometimes things aren't always super cheerfully, but the story was kind of boring too. I'll probably reread it, but I suppose you could say I didn't really empathize with them because I was a kid. Whereas, I mean, 13 Reasons Why is a little bit different just because I believe that it, even though it dealt with like really serious topics, just like 13 or The Fault in Our Stars, 13 Reasons Why had such a specific, I guess like childlike wonder almost. It had those themes of like the girl was at a park and she just wanted to be happy, you know, she just wanted to experience those same things that someone her age would, but couldn't because she was suicidal, you know. And I was able to relate with those themes, not the suicidal part necessarily, but I was able to see the heartbreak that she wasn't being able to be approached, or people didn't approach her and treat her the way that she wanted to. They treated her like she was lesser than, or because she was weird, or because she was quiet, or because she had a big butt, and for some reason that was weird. And I don't know. It was I really love that book because it had so many just small things that I was able to relate to, and I've reread that book many times. It never gets old. And the main character, Clyde, I think, I love the fact that I don't love it, but he keeps beating himself up because he thinks that he's not good enough, that he didn't do enough for her, when in reality he was the only one that looked at her like she was something, you know. I really like that, especially as someone that overthinks and over empathizes with situations and people, and overthinks scenarios when it's really not that deep. Yeah, I really like that book. If you haven't read it, I mean, honestly, if you haven't read these books, I think you should. You might have already, but On a Sunbeam is a comic book. Just going straight into it. It's really good, and it's really colorful. The plot is extremely, I don't know, for me it was really like, it really pulled me in. I got this comic book when I went to California, and I was reading it on the road trip home, so like 3 days worth of reading. And it really just let me sit with the characters. I was able to really fall in love with them, almost fall in love with the two girls, because so just a brief like synopsis or whatever. The two girls get separated like after like middle school or high school, and then they don't realize they love each other until they're like adults, and at which point they realize that they need each other and they decide to live with each other. And the whole like time, I'm just like thinking about it, and I'm like, damn, like that kind of love, that like young kind of like coming of age story, it really, I always really like them. What else? I don't know, it's really warm. A lot of these stories are very just like kind of welcoming, and it's just, I love that. I was able to really relate to it too because they were about my age at the time that I was reading them. But yeah, it's a big book, but I also think you should read that just because it lets you really see how just young and dumb really kids can be, yet how colorful. The colors, I think, really put the story together, and it's in like this space kind of area, so it's very fantasy-like, and it just really kind of immerses you into this childlike state. No Longer Human. That story, also a must. It's really short. Maybe like 200-ish pages, but it's really short. It's very... It really opened my eyes towards addiction, because this story is also about suicide. The author, after finishing this book, he committed suicide. And in the story, the character also dies. Or no, does he? I don't believe he... Maybe just spoiler warning. My headphones. Hold on. I don't know if he dies, but I think that he tries to at least 3 times. How do I explain the story? It's a very complicated story where the main character is dealing with depression and not being able to understand how people feel. So essentially what this question, or the whole class, has been about, how do you feel for someone? How do you know if you're feeling for someone? How do you know if you're doing it right, or too little, or too much, etc., right? He doesn't know how to do that, because he just does what is conventional, what is expected of him, not because he understands it, but because people expect him to. And he was raised in a really rich household with many sisters and maids, and he was not always looked towards when he was a child, so he wasn't able to fully develop those skills, and he was, I would say, assaulted by some of the maids, and it kind of leads him to this stage in his adult life where he just doesn't know how to express his feelings, doesn't know how to speak up for himself, and kind of copes with alcohol, which is really unfortunate, because every time he does it, it's really just like you can see the desperation in his voice, or his thoughts, where he just wants someone to look for him. So he just wants someone to be there for him, but he never gets that someone. Another part that I really found interesting was when he was a kid, and a way that he would kind of cope with his feelings is trying to get people to not really be suspicious of him or his feelings. So he would be the class clown, but there was this one guy who would inevitably become his lifelong friend, just out of accident, because he didn't say no. But the main character was making a joke, and his best friend kind of looked at him, or this random kid at the time looked at him, and he was like, "You're faking it, and I know you're faking it." And the main character kind of just like, he kind of just like is baffled and shocked, and in order to take back control, he becomes his best friend. So you can imagine how strange it is for that to happen. I don't know. A lot of the things that this main character does are so confusing, and it's really hard to see where he's coming from, because he also hates women. Many women will fall for him because he's very attractive, and he's very like quiet, and just like kind of like a lone wolf, and he doesn't understand why. He just wants them to leave him alone, which is, it's just and he also doesn't like prostitutes. He likes innocent girls because they remind him of when he was innocent, or the fact that he's not innocent anymore. I don't know. I think you should really read this book, because, I mean, you won't relate to it that much unless if you've been addicted to alcohol, or had prostitutes, or if, but I don't think you should. I think it's more of a lesson to understand where someone can come from, and how such an unfortunate upbringing, or I guess even the fact that you can be really educated and everything doesn't mean that you're going to be socially aware or emotionally aware and prepared for life, I mean, it also took me a while to read this book, but I think it's a must. As for Swimming to Freedom, that other book is also really good. That one is about a Chinese man that's trying to escape communist China. And first he goes to Hong Kong and then he comes to the US. In the end, he does live a pretty good life. He's still alive and he has kids that are like film directors and actors. So that's how I found him, through their kids' like work. Which I just found really fascinating that someone can have that kind of life and still be like, well off. The whole story though, also, it took me a while to finish, just like No Longer Human, but for different purposes, because it was really good and I didn't want to finish it just because the author wrote in a really nice way and it was educational and it was informative, and I just really was able to imagine this whole world as he was trying to be the only brother among 3 or 4 sisters and go to school and try to just trying to navigate through death in China as a kid and as a coming of age adult, which I just can't ever imagine, just because he describes some people hanging or just dead animals in the streets. In another part, he describes how the students in his school would torture the teachers because I think it was just because they were against China, communist China. But the entire thing is that if you're not against China, you're going to be an enemy, and that's what their whole thing is. They're just undercover, and the struggles that brings is really interesting, because I never would imagine that they would eat chicken feet because they didn't have enough money, and they would make up a little fairy tale that if you eat chicken feet you'll be fast when you try to escape China. I mean, it's interesting, but I don't know, that one story I really like. It breaks my heart a bit just because it's really sad, and I can't imagine. I don't think anyone deserves to live like that, but what am I gonna do? I'm not sure. I think that's all of the stories that I have. I'm just gonna read my notes. But yeah, all of these stories, I feel like they all kind of taught me that, I don't know, they're interesting. They're fun to read. They're really easy. I'm a very picky reader, so when I find a good book, I appreciate it. And a lot of these were either gifted to me, I just got randomly, like at the California in the bookstore, or someone recommended them, and I think that's the best way for me to get books, because if I just pick it off the shelf, I probably won't like it. What other thing? I guess I could summarize a bit more about the value of literature. I don't know. I've seen the value in my life with books. I don't always read, but I feel like when I do, it really means a lot. And the people that read in my life, I think I don't know. I just think it's good. I think everyone should read. I don't want to say they're smarter, but I mean, in a way, I am. I'm not dissing anyone that doesn't read, but at the same time, I feel like you should, because it's educational, and you should try to challenge yourself and not just watch videos, because videos will never take the place of books. I don't believe that that'll be the case. You can watch as many videos about coding or filming or photography or whatever it is, but I think books, it's not At least if it's like super informative like that and it's like heavy text, sure, I'll go to a video. But if it's a story, I don't think an audiobook or video will ever replace it, because it just, as corny as it is, it's not the same watching a book on a rainy day or watching a video on a rainy day as reading a book on a rainy day. But yeah, again, I think you should read No Longer Human. I still have so much time on this video, but I feel like, but it's better to cut it short than keep it long. I'm just rereading if I have any notes left. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's about it for me. On one last note, it was really fun taking your class. I really appreciate all the stories and the things you've said. And I don't know, it was really nice, and I think that I must have talked a lot during class, maybe a little too much at times. I'm not sure. I just really like to tell people my opinions, especially when it's something that's like super interesting, like what are the stories that we've read. I don't know, I find it fascinating how people can write so just like smoothly, you know? I wish I could do that. Or more or less, I wish I could speak like that. But yeah, guess that's it. Hopefully I'll see you next semester or whenever, but thanks for watching my video.